Anyone who's ever done anything worth doing has dreamed big, failed mightily, and mostly started from humble beginnings. This is a podcast about such people. The most fascinating podcast in the world is fascinating because of the stories of the human beings. Hello, everybody. This is Pat DeCerbo, the most fascinating podcast in the world. Not because of me. It has nothing to do with me. It has to do with the people that come on the show. Today we have my lifelong friend, Art LaFleur, otherwise known as Arthur LaFleur III. I just learned today. Art and I have been friends since 1976, where we were both students in Miss Olmsted's fourth grade class. And among other things in common, we had a crush on Miss Olmsted from the age of, I guess we were 10 years old. We were a little young for her. Art and I wrestled on a wrestling team together, on the Pee Wee wrestling team, where his dad was one of our coaches, and I remember that well. We also both played Little League Baseball and knew one another from Little League Baseball. But at some point, I kept playing sports, and Art took a different tack. Art got involved in the arts, and that was around 10th grade, and Art got involved with theater arts and music and performing arts, which was, I would imagine, a big decision because back then, you know, with sports teams and stuff, the idea of just deciding not to do sports anymore and to take a different path, I personally think took a lot of guts at that age, you know, just in high school, and Art went full throttle, 100%. And he got involved in plays and other productions in our school and was very much a leader in the arts. And he's going to talk about that and continues to be a recording artist and singer and songwriter today. After high school, Art went on to SUNY Cobleskill, which is a state university in New York, and took a business administration major, and he began a career subsequently in banking, which took him for his entire career, about 30 years, ultimately culminating in a regional position with M&T Bank. Shortly after college, and concurrent with his banking career, I believe, he married Debbie, and subsequently he and Debbie had two children, a son, Kevin, and a daughter, Marisa. And Art has two grandchildren as well. Kevin has two children. And eventually, Art had a really fascinating series of stories in his life, which is kind of what put us back together in an ongoing conversation. We were sort of put together recently, I should say not long ago, serendipitously, and we spent a fair amount of time together talking about his life in the interim, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Art, welcome.
Thank you, Pat. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation today.
Thank you. So I'm in the habit, as you may know, of asking people about their earliest memories. And so what are your earliest memories, like age 3, 4, 5, 6? How old were you?
Honestly, my earliest memories go back to about 2 or 3. I remember some trips that my parents would take. In particular, I remember we went and visited an aunt and uncle that lived out in Buffalo. So I remember that trip. I remember, and specifically the lights on the falls at night. I remember going to the aquarium out there. So very, very, very young. Just little bits and pieces of things that kind of flash back to me. But that's going back to when I was like 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm. And how is it that you got involved in wrestling initially with your dad? Like,
It
did your
was
dad wrestle? I forget.
my dad did wrestle. He was actually when he was in high school, he went to Tamarack High School and was one of the very early participants in that program when he was in school there, and had a stellar record when he went to school there. And in fact, as an adult, I would say when I was as a teenager growing up, he would talk about when he would go back to visit the school, they still had uh, like a plaque on their wall there with his name and record on it. So he was a very very strong advocate for wrestling. He loved wrestling. He like lived and breathed it. So as a son, you always want to do what's going to make your dad happy and proud. So that's what got me into wrestling.
Interesting. And so we talked about wrestling a little bit. We talked about baseball.
Mm-hmm.
When you went to college, subsequent to or excuse me, 10th grade, forgive me,
Mm-hmm.
um, when you decided to make the break from sports to the arts,
Mm-hmm.
uh, what what happened? Was there something that happened that made you say, you know what, I just don't want to do this anymore, or I want to, conversely, I want to do something in the arts?
Yeah, I mean, really, what happened was I started to play guitar. I got my first guitar for my 13th birthday, and really just really wanted to do that. I wanted to get good at that. There was something about being in front of people and performing that just really sort of captured me. I had a good friend of mine at the time that we had gone to high school with, Pat Jameson, was involved in the community players that we had where we grew up, and he invited me to come to see their production of Oliver. And when I saw that play and saw the fun that he had and the relationships that he was building with the cast and crew, it just was something that appealed to me. It just sort of pulled me. And the following spring is when I auditioned for my first role in the community players. But I was just drawn to that, and I realized that I was wrestling for my dad, not for myself. I was doing those things for the wrong reasons, and performing is what really made me happy. So I basically had to make that decision and tell my dad I didn't want to wrestle anymore, and sort of make the leap into performing. And yes, that was a difficult conversation.
I was going to say, what was that like when you had to
Yeah,
tell your dad?
it was hard. He didn't love it. He didn't love it. He's obviously a very strong supporter of what I do. But at the time, it was a difficult conversation to have for sure.
It's interesting because I was just thinking about it and how, I'm a wrestling fanatic. I
Hmm.
just got back from the NCAA tournament, which was
Oh
last
wow.
weekend.
Okay.
Um, the- I was never really any good at wrestling compared to these guys, right? Like you're watching two four-time state champions
Yeah.
wrestle in the
Right.
semifinals, and one of them's going to lose, and it's just crazy.
Yeah.
But but I can imagine that was because he was very enthusiastic about
Oh,
the
very.
sport.
I would. I mean, honestly, you could say he was a wrestling fanatic. He truly. He just
Hmm.
loves the sport. Loves the sport. So it was tough, but we got through it.
So then, what happened? What was your first? What was your first performance or play that you got?
So the first play that I was in um, was called Jabberwocky, which was a play by James Thurber. And as a newbie just starting out in the process, I had three or four minor roles that so you do costume changes and come back on and maybe have a line or two, but really just part of the whole ensemble cast. Um, and that was my first jump into the performing arts, and it was a blast. It was so much fun. Yeah, loved it.
Hmm. So you graduate high school. How
Hmm.
did you decide on Cobleskill?
that's where that's where Debbie was going to college.
All right. So Debbie was Art's high school sweetheart. So they
Yep.
ended up going to college together.
Yeah. Yep.
You graduated college.
Hmm.
And who came first, Kevin or Marisa?
Marisa came first. She was born in 1989. Um, so a few years after college, and then Kevin was 13 months later.
Okay. And were you performing this whole time? Were you writing
So
music, playing
I
music?
actually wasn't. There was kind of a period of time where I stopped doing that, and ironically, I went back to sports for a while. I played in a lot of leagues. Played in softball leagues, basketball leagues. There was a period of time in my, I guess I was probably my late 20s, mid to late 20s. I started playing competitive men's volleyball, which I loved. Absolutely loved playing volleyball. But that took up a lot of my time, and I really didn't get back into performing again until probably around the year 2000. I think is when I actually joined a band and really started to focus on that again.
What was that band called?
My very first band was called Off Ramp,
Okay.
and it was a classic rock, blues cover band.
Mm-hmm. So part of your story and the reason that you and I think initiated our conversation about the possibility of the podcast has to do with your second wife
Correct.
and who developed an illness and which led to in every way life-changing events for you.
Hmm.
Could you tell me a little bit about your second wife and what came to pass and so on and so
Absolutely,
forth?
absolutely. So, my second wife, her name was Elizabeth, Beth, as she was known to most of her friends. Um, she and I met at a place where we had worked together. We worked at Sunmark Credit Union together, um, and we were friends. We started out as friends, and it just developed into obviously something way more than that. The interesting thing that I talk about with her is we both knew the day that we met that we were destined to be together. I can't really explain that. I just she and I would talk about it, later in our relationship. But I remember the day I met her. I was just immediately taken. I couldn't explain it. I didn't see that coming at all. But I sort of dismissed it. And just over the course of time, as our friendship grew, and we just accepted, who and what we were supposed to be. So we dated for a number of years, lived together for a number of years, and I actually was initially hesitant to get remarried. Divorce is difficult. It takes its toll on everyone involved, and I had decided that I didn't want to put myself in a position of having to go through that again. Um, but it was always different with Beth. I often remark that with Beth, it was as if she'd always been there. Like I feel like even though we were literally together for 8 years, um, it felt like she was always there. And as it turned out, there were numerous instances in our lives where our paths had crossed, and but we didn't know each other then. We had gone to the same elementary school before I had moved to Galway. Um, I had started in West Sand Lake, and we both had gone to school there. We had a conversation one day about the alphabet people. That was a learning tool that they used back then, And I was stunned when she mentioned the alphabet people, and she was stunned that I knew who they were, and that's sort of what uh, began our early friendship. But she was an amazingly kind-hearted person and had a terrific sense of humor. I don't think I've laughed as hard as I did in those years that she and I were together. And it was just it was balance. She and I just had a balance that was undeniable, honestly.
So what happened?
So very early in our relationship, we learned that she had what's called polycystic kidney and liver disease. So basically, what that means is that your liver and your kidneys develop cysts, and it's a case where in a large number of people that have it, it doesn't become a chronic issue, but when it does, it becomes very serious very quickly. So what it basically did is she has these cysts in her liver that caused her liver to expand and increase in size. Um, and by the time she was in the hospital and awaiting transplant, which I'll get to more in a minute, her liver was about 4 times the size it was actually supposed to be.
Mm.
So it's a pretty nasty disease when it kicks in. So she was diagnosed with this at the time. I remember, being very scared about it and nervous about it. But her doctor had said, all we can do is just kind of monitor it, and if the cysts become bigger or more of a problem, then we try to tackle it with treatment options at that point in time. Um, and so then a number of years went by, and it was fine. There were no issues. It didn't cause any health issues until it did, and so that would have been, um, I guess, around 20 early part of 2016. We actually had just gotten married. We got married in February of 2016. I finally decided that you know it was silly because I knew that she and I were not ever going to get divorced. I really truly believed that, and so I decided, okay, yeah, let's do this. So we got married in February. By May is when she started to show the early symptoms. So she was developing these fevers that they couldn't really explain, and then she started to develop a condition that's known as ascites, which is a gathering of fluid in the abdominal cavity um, that has to be drained. So periodically she would have to go to the hospital, and they would, basically what they would do is insert a needle and drain the fluid. When you get that condition, it's usually due to a couple of issues. You're either having issues with your kidneys not functioning properly, your liver, or there's a heart issue, and that's what typically causes that condition. So, given that she had the polycystic liver disease, it was pretty easy to figure out that that's what was causing it. But we didn't really know how it was going to be treated, what we were going to do. Certainly, the doctors and hospitals in this area were not accustomed to seeing this degree of issue. So they referred us to a hospital in Boston, uh, which was a liver specialist, and she began the process of being listed for liver transplant. Um, and it's it's interesting because the day that we went out there for our initial consultation, we still didn't really know that that's what was going on. We thought we were being sent there to discuss um, options for treatment. We didn't realize that the option for treatment was transplant. So when we got there, we were a bit taken aback by that discussion, but also knew that, okay, well, if this is what we have to do, then this is what we have to do. And so that began the process of her being evaluated to be listed for transplant, which in and of itself is really quite a process to go through that in order to be listed.
So did she go on to have a liver transplant?
So as excuse me, as things developed, um, She was in the process of being listed. Uh, During that time, unfortunately, her mother had a very sudden allergic reaction that put her into pulmonary and then cardiac arrest. So while Beth was having to be in Boston, her mom passed away here in upstate New York. And at the time, the doctors had discussed, because of the quickness with which her mom had passed, there was some talk of the possibility of her mom, being able to donate her mom's liver um, to use for Beth. Unfortunately, the circumstances didn't quite fall in our favor, so that wasn't able to happen. And then shortly after that, they discovered an issue with one of the veins that runs from the liver to the small bowel that had been completely um, closed off. So a liver transplant, excuse me, was no longer viable, and they had to delist her. So at that time, we were devastated because you're being told you can't be listed, which is pretty much means there's nothing we can do. You pretty much have to wait it out, and then eventually you'll pass. But fortunately, that wasn't the case with Beth. Um, as it turns out, she needed a different type of transplant. So now, instead of a liver transplant, she was going to have what's called a multivisceral transplant, which simply just means multiple organs. So there were only, at the time, there were basically 3 hospitals in the country that would do that type of transplant procedure. One of them was in Georgetown, Georgetown University Hospital, MedStar. So the Boston hospital referred us there, and then we began the process again of being evaluated for her to be listed. So because it's a different hospital, you have to go through the process again. Some of the tests they can use, but some of them they had to redo. Um, so we went down to Georgetown and learned what this multi-organ transplant really means. And really what it means is, as the doctor described it, they basically take out your core organs, um, and then put a whole new set in. So it's kind of like removing an engine from a car and putting a new engine in. And it has to be all from one donor because, as you can well imagine, there's multiple nerve endings and vessels and so forth that are all interconnected with all those organs. So they have to take them all at once and then put a whole new set in all at once from one donor. Um, so that was a pretty significant procedure. Um, it had a really, really high success rate. I remember as we researched it, that type of operation had like an 85 to 90% success rate. Um, so it was kind of a no brainer. We wanted to do this, and the alternative was nothing. In which case her condition would just continue to worsen. Um, so we went through that procedure to get evaluated. During that time, some more complications would occur. Her kidneys failed. So now, in addition, she needed to have a kidney transplant. Um, and it just seemed that at every turn, whenever something could go wrong with her, it did. And I literally have lost count of the number of times that a doctor or a nurse, um, or a surgeon would come into her room and say, "Boy, she's rewriting our textbooks. We've never seen someone react the way her body is reacting to these different things." The good news was they always found a way to address the whatever the issue was, um, and they would move on, and we would continue the process. During that time, so this all took place over the course of the year from early 2016 to early 2017. Um, and during that year, her condition worsened, and that's the kind of the double-edged sword with a transplant. If you're too healthy, you can't have it done because you're not ready. But at the same time, by the time you are ready, your health is deteriorated pretty solidly. You're in pretty bad shape. So over the course of the year, it was difficult for me to watch that process. Basically, you've got this person who's your everything, and all you can do is watch them deteriorate. And you're supportive, and you do whatever you can to try to give them comfort. But ultimately, you just are watching them deteriorate. So that was difficult. Um, Eventually, by I would say April, so now no, so I guess it would have been March, right around the beginning of March. Her condition had worsened to the point where she had to stay in Georgetown full time. Prior to that, we would make trips back and forth anytime we needed to have any procedures done at the hospital. But by then, she really had to be there full time. So what I would do is I would work here in upstate New York during the week, Monday through basically Friday morning, and then around noon on Friday, I would drive down to DC, spend the weekend with her, and then drive home Sunday night and start the process again on Monday morning. And I did that from March until about mid-April. Um, she finally got the call for transplant, which is an interesting process in and of itself. You actually get multiple calls, and sometimes it just doesn't work out. Like they discover that there's an issue with the donated organ. It may have been too damaged in whatever trauma caused the death of the donor, or there may be some blood issues or things of that nature. So she had actually gotten 2 or 3 calls prior to the actual day of transplant that were false alarms, if you will. So we start down, and then they call and say, sorry, this isn't actually going to be a match, and you go back home. Finally, in mid-April of 2017, they had a match that they said was perfect, and I remember specifically the team that worked with her was very excited. In the time that she was there, she really got to know her team well, and they really liked her. They adored her, and she was very highly regarded there. So everyone was really excited about this transplant surgery, and I remember getting there and talking to the surgeon, and he's like, this is going to be great. She's going to be uh, able to go on after this, and you'll get back to a normal life. And it was really exciting. And they said, we're gonna be back around 2 o'clock in the morning to take you down to pre-op, and we'll get you ready, and off we go. And so that's exactly what happened. Around 2 o'clock, there's a knock on the door, and the nurse comes in, says, okay, it's time, let's get you down. And we went down to pre-op, and I got to spend about an hour with her or so before they took her into surgery. Um, and then she went into surgery to have the transplant. And unfortunately, this is where things get a little dark. She did not survive the surgery. Um, while having the surgery, they had actually already completed the transplant, um, and her blood pressure started to crash, and they couldn't get her blood pressure back up, and then basically she crashed on the table, and they could not revive her, and she did not survive the surgery.
Hmm. So how long was that from her early diagnosis till the time of that surgery? How much time had passed?
So from the diagnosis period, it was a number of years.
Hmm.
I would say probably about 6 years from the time she was diagnosed with the liver disease to the time that she had the surgery. Yeah.
So from 2016, did you say, until
So
2022?
yeah, when she first started to actually show the symptoms of illness, that
Hmm.
was 2016. So
Okay.
around the end of May 2016, and then by April of 2017, she had passed.
Okay. All righty.
Yep.
So throughout that process, in spite of the tragic ending, you developed a relationship with the hospital.
I did. So this this is interesting to me how this all occurred. So, I remember it really started the day that she passed. I remember when the surgeon came into the waiting room where I was, and my dad was with me as well, and he had to tell us that she didn't survive the surgery. And here's this man that is just brilliant. He's a brilliant surgeon and just a super super kind individual. Comes into the room with tears streaming down his face, telling me that she didn't make it, and saying to me, I don't understand what happened, because we had completed the transplant. The organs were all functioning properly. The blood flow was as it should be. I don't know what happened, and I don't understand why she didn't survive. So I need to ask you a really hard question. Will you allow me to do a post-mortem exam so we can try to figure out what happened? And even in my moment of grief, I remember vividly saying to him, absolutely, please do this so that you can find out what happened, so that someone else doesn't have to be sitting where I'm sitting right now, and you can prevent this for someone else from happening. And so that's what kind of started it. And so they went on to do the postmortem. In the days and weeks following her passing, um, I felt compelled to thank everyone that had been involved with her care, not just at Georgetown, uh, but also the people in Boston, because even then, like, they were all great as well. It just turned out they couldn't help her. So I went on this mission of writing thank you cards. I bought little note cards packets, and just began writing thank you notes. Thanking the nurses, thanking the doctors, thanking the coordinators, thanking the staff, that the technicians, just basically everyone that I could think of that somehow had an interaction with her. Just writing these thank you notes. And it was around that time that I got contacted again by MedStar, this time from the person that was the head of their philanthropy department. Um, and they reached out to me because they wanted to create a memorial for Beth, um, because she had made such an impact on everyone there. They wanted to know if I would be okay if they created a memorial for her. And of course, I was honored that they wanted to do that. And was, absolutely, let's do this. And again, expressing my gratitude for the care that she received there. So we started that process, and that, culminated in them creating there's a plaque now. When you go to MedStar Transplant Institute in Georgetown, and you go into the waiting area where the new patients are coming in to wait to be seen, there's a wall that has a waterfall built into it, and then next to that waterfall is a plaque with Beth's picture and a little paragraph that I wrote about her. Um, so it's there for everyone to see. So while we were going through that process of sort of mapping out what that was going to look like, they invited me to come down to DC and interview me and talk with me. And they did an interview very much like this, where we talked about the story of what we had gone through, and they actually used that on the hospital website. There's a section where you go and you can talk about patient experiences at the hospital, and my and Beth's story were part of that, and it's used on the hospital website. And I remember, as I was going through that process, being a little surprised, maybe a little taken aback at how much attention I was getting for all of this. And I'll never forget it. At one point, the person I was talking to just sort of stopped me, and they said, I need you to understand something. We barely hear from the people that make it. When we have a successful transplant, we hardly ever hear from those people. We never hear from the people that it wasn't successful for. So what you're doing is really unique and really different, and that's why we want to focus on this, and that's why we want to get your story out there. so that you can, really try to help other people. I became very, very strong advocate for donor awareness, becoming a donor, not just a deceased donor, but you can, there are living donors that you can do for various things. And I just became a very strong advocate for that. And so that continued to develop. I still remain in touch with the surgeon. We're friends, and we communicate on a pretty regular basis. Um, and it was really special in terms of some of the relationships that have developed as a result of what she went through. Um, Ultimately, it led to an opportunity for me to actually get a job at MedStar Transplant Institute, which is now where I work. So after a number of years, in banking, after 30 some years in banking, now I find this opportunity that's presented to me to actually go and work at the very place that she was getting such amazing care, and the people there are just so incredible. Like it sounds like a cliche. Like for these folks, it's not really just a job. Like it's their life. Sounds like a cliche, but it's not actually. It's actually true. It is their life, and everybody that's involved in transplant has a story. Everyone's got a story, um, just like me, and we all kind of come together, and then we try to do these things for patients so that they can successfully make it through the transplant process. So now I work there. I work at MedStar Transplant Institute, and it's amazing. I get to help people navigate this process and have a successful run at getting a transplant.
How do you help them? What do you do for them?
So there's a few different things I do. I work um, very closely with the transplant coordinator nurses. So a coordinator nurse is basically when you're a transplant patient, your main point of contact is your coordinator nurse. They sort of organize everything for you and help you with that process. So I work very closely with them to work with the patients to ensure that they're getting the things done that they need to in a timely manner, and also trying to educate the patients on the process and what it involves. Um, I think that there's this. So I should back up and then just say I actually work with the kidney team. I work with the kidney transplant team, and I think that there's sort of this misconception broadly that kidney transplants aren't a big deal anymore because there are so many that are done. There's so many kidney transplants that are done every year, and I think there's this misconception that it's not a big deal, but the reality is it's a very big deal because you're removing an organ and placing a foreign object into your body. It's an organ from another person. So there's always battles that occur, and so your body is constantly trying to fight this new organ that's been placed in it, and that's why so you're put on a regimen of immunosuppressives that you have to take for the rest of your life. So there's this whole process, and so my job is really to help people understand this process, to help them understand that it's important that they get their testing done as quickly as possible, because the goal is you get through your evaluation, we get you listed, and then it's a matter of waiting the time it takes to get an organ offer. Well, during that wait time, there's still a lot of things you got to do because you got to stay listed. Because even though once you get listed, it doesn't mean you're going to stay listed if you don't do the things that you're supposed to do.
Which
Um,
is what?
so it's like getting your monthly blood samples, your monthly blood draws. Yeah, you got to do them every month. Got to happen. When we tell you that you need a colonoscopy, you got to get it done. You can't wait. You can't put it off, because we have to make sure. So you're kind of constantly going through these various medical tests because we have to make sure that aside from your kidney disease, you're the most healthy that you can be, because we have to make sure that you're going to be a good steward of the organ you're receiving. And one of the things I've learned over my time dealing with transplants is that, and it was really because I had never thought of it like this before. Even when Beth was going through it, you always think of two people that are involved when you're doing a transplant. You've got the donor and you've got the recipient. But the reality is, there's three people that are involved in every single transplant. You have the donor, you have the recipient, but then you also have the recipient that doesn't get that organ because you did. So you always have to make sure that the recipient of the donation is going to be the best possible steward of that organ that they can be, and make sure that they live a healthy lifestyle and do all the things that they need to make sure that that organ lasts, so that it wasn't given in vain, right? So that's really the process that goes into it. Getting people to understand that process, and it's a big part of what I do, I think.
How long have you been doing it now?
So I started working for MedStar in August of 2020. Ironically, it was right in the middle of the shutdown. Um, I did all of my interviewing through Zoom meetings, and was very fortunate that they were impressed enough with my background from a resume standpoint, but also more importantly, I think they really connected with my personal story and what Beth and I went through, um, and the experience I had there, and they really saw value in that, in how I could help that, help new patients coming in, because I can relate to what they're dealing with on that side of it, as well as the hospital side of it. Um, so August of 2020, went through a series of interviews, and they wound up actually creating a new position for me, just to get me on board. And then I did that for a couple of years, and then last year was sort of promoted to a new position, which again they created, and it's kind of a constantly evolving type of thing where we, just new things develop that I do, and it just becomes part of my job description.
Where where do you go from here?
um, Interestingly, I kind of miss management a little bit. I kind of miss being involved in high level decision making and planning, and things of that nature. So I've actually been undergoing a series of meetings with my, uh, I guess technically would be my boss's boss. Um, Basically, he's the person that brought me into MedStar and created the opportunity for me. He and I have become friends, and we meet on a regular basis. And this past year, we've had some discussions about, what I'd like to do professionally, and typically there's been a little bit of a wall there, because I do work remotely. So the hospital is located in Washington, D.C. I work remotely from my office in upstate New York, and the mindset has always been, you have to be on site in order to be in any type of managerial level. Um, but I think that's changing. There's some new opportunities that are happening at the hospital, and um, it seems that there may be some opportunity for me to get into some higher level things, and maybe get into some sort of managerial position. That would require that, maybe I go down there once a month for 4 or 5 days every month. But again, very very early stages, and really just kind of idea and discussions at this point. But you know they've done very well by me so far, so I have no reason to believe that something might not develop.
Is there anything else that we're missing? Is there anything you might like to ask me or say that we haven't talked about?
I would like to just sort of circle back a little bit to my performing, and songwriting. That's become a big part of who I am. So I have my day job, obviously, with the hospital, but really, I am at heart, I am a musician and songwriter. I do write original music, that is available on all streaming platforms under Art LaFleur. But in particular, I want to talk about the song that I wrote for Beth. Um, it's a song titled "I've Come to Realize," and it was my way of trying to deal with the grief and just overwhelming sense of loss that I felt after Beth passed away. I wrote the song in the months following her passing. It was one of those songs that sort of wrote itself in about 10 or 15 minutes. I had the whole structure of the song fleshed out, had all the lyrics done. I, I won't pretend it's not a heavy song, because it is. It's a very heavy song. It's a very sad song, because it was me dealing with that loss. Um, so I would ask, for anyone watching this, go out and find it on YouTube. There is a video, again, under Art LaFleur music. It's called "I've Come to Realize," and it will give you a little bit of insight into kind of what happened to me in the days following. Um, I do
I've
want to
listened
also
to it. I think it's a great song.
thank
And
you.
of course, serendipitously, after that, I hear it on the radio. So
It does get played on the radio, so that's kind of cool. Um,
I thought
but
it was
also,
Darius Rucker, but it turned out it was you.
that's not the first time I've heard that, actually.
You sound like him.
that's
It's
what
funny.
that's what I've been told. But I also want to say that, with all the clouds, there is absolutely a silver lining. Um, in the video, without really giving anything away, there is one scene that occurs where there's a woman walking out of a bar, and when we pause for like a millisecond, she puts her hand on my chest, and then we pass. That is actually my current wife, Shauna Dawn, um, who I have had known for years and years and years and years, and we reconnected in the summer of 2018. We had just a chance meeting in downtown Saratoga, and just had this sort of spark that occurred. I saw her performing on stage with the band that we are now both in. Actually, we both are in the band at the same time now, but at the time I was not in that band, and I was really taken with her, and we just connected, and there was this spark, and um, I thought there's no way that she would ever be interested in me, so I didn't call her.
Mm.
But fortunately, she called me, and we started to see each other, and the rest is history. And we got married in 2020, in September of 2020, actually. So there is a silver lining, I think if there's one message I want to put out to anyone that's going through whatever, if you just open your heart to it, you can find happiness again. It's not going to be the same. It's never the same. You're a different person after you go through a tragedy, and it's really a question of the process of finding who you are, identifying who you are as this new person coming out the other side, and then just being open to the possibilities. And I am very, very fortunate and very, very blessed, and I can't believe I get to be married to and perform with someone that quite literally is my best friend, and it's pretty cool.
So you're not speaking from experience because you weren't open to the possibility.
I was I, I
You have to
wasn't
have someone who will take charge,
I
is what you're
wasn't
saying.
I wasn't open to the possibility. That's true. Actually, that's funny that you mentioned that and put it that way. I hadn't really thought about it like that, but I guess
Play
that
hard
is
to
the
get.
truth.
That's the
But
message.
there's the message. Oh,
It's
indeed.
funny.
Yeah.
So I'm in the habit of saying the most important punctuation in the English language is the hyphen. Do you know why?
I do. I remember you talking about this in your other podcasts. Yeah.
So it's what's between our date of birth and our
Yep.
date of death.
Yep.
If you
What's
were
the
to
hyphen?
summarize your life, like what would you want people to know about Art LaFleur when he's gone?
I think I would want people to know that I was a kind person, an an empathetic person that tried to make things better than they were before I was here.
You made a difference.
I hope so. I'm not. I guess I don't. Maybe arrogance isn't the right word, but I'm not confident enough to say that I have. But I hope I have. I
Uh,
hope that I have.
my opinion's not called for, and I rarely volunteer it, but I feel like it's obvious that you have, and I kind of, for me, boil it down to really small interactions. Like if I can make a difference in one person's life in a moment today,
Hmm.
even if it's a smile,
Yeah.
like, nobody smiles at other people.
Right.
And I smile at people and they smile back, and
Yeah.
they don't even have
That,
to say anything. And you've
right.
clearly done way more than that.
Uh,
So, in my opinion, you've made a difference. Not that
well,
you asked for my opinion, it's always
I
risky.
but I do appreciate it. So no worries there, my friend. I do appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm glad we got put back together serendipitously, and I'm
Mhm.
glad we got to talk subsequently. And then thank you very much for coming on my podcast. And I will look forward to seeing you at our 40th high school reunion,
Indeed.
God willing.
Indeed. That's right. Thank you so much for having me today, Pat. I really have enjoyed this, and thanks for letting me get my story out there.
My pleasure. Take care. Bye
You
bye,
too.
Art.
Bye bye.
If you enjoy the most fascinating podcast in the world, please follow on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, and follow on Apple Podcast.